What the hell is he talking about? Everyone tells you to read the Russians, the Greeks, the Frenchies, but nobody warns you just how difficult they can be. It's annoying because you know they are rich in insights, but you feel like you just don't have the tools there to dig it out. So of course, here are 4 of my favourite tips that I've used to get more out of my difficult books. And believe me, they're not the same old bits of advice you hear everywhere. Some come from great minds and literary critics, others are scientifically proven to help your learning, and some just come to me in a Benadryl-fueled state of paranoid delirium, so you know they're good. First up is to learn the DNA of the author. And that sounds bizarre at first, but I promise you it's going to make a lot more sense once we backtrack into a trap that every reader falls into. When you finally decide to stop doom scrolling your bookshelf and commit to one of the big names, say Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, Plato, what do you instinctively reach for? These are the magnum opuses, or opie, I guess. These are the big boys. Crime and Punishment, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, The Republic. This is what we gravitate towards, and for good reason. I mean, it's where all of the online hype and all of the critical acclaim centers around. But I argue that in many cases, this is a mistake. This is the wrong first impression, and it actually screws over your reading. Let me explain that. Now, authors don't just spawn in and produce their masterpiece. It doesn't happen like that. These are often the culmination or the pinnacle of a long writing career. Years, maybe decades of building experience and nurturing their worldview and really getting tight on what they mean to say. Like real DNA, like physical traits in your family tree, ideas and concepts can also carry through an author's work. And yes, they change over time, it's natural, but the core remains there. That means sometimes the only way for you to properly understand an author's big work is if you go back. If you go back and you find context in their prior work. And that is the DNA we speak of, the core, the groundwork. For example, Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra is notorious for being misinterpreted or just completely misunderstood in more ways than one. And this is often because readers ignore past or even future works which lay out some of that philosophical basis. Because at the end of the day, it's a dramatization of a philosophy. I have to stress that DNA is not just found in the past. Like, yes, a lot of the times it will be, but it can also be in future works. In works which are made to explain past work, or made to be more accessible, or which lay out the same ideas, but in a more formal, concise way, for example. And so DNA is not linear like in a family tree, but it can also be, I guess, circular. It can go forwards and backwards. It can be a sphere in the author's work. For example, in Nietzsche's case, we have the birth of tragedy and later, the genealogy of morality. And these expand on ideas like slave and master morality, the ascetic ideal, the Apollonian versus the Dionysian. And don't get me wrong, these are difficult ideas on their own, right? But they also form the undercurrent to Zarathustra, or maybe some other works. And we almost use them to prepare ourselves to approach that. And some readers will skip over that entirely, and it's like no wonder they're lost. We need it. We need that DNA to form a picture, to build something clear. Right, I know this is hard to believe. I'm sorry, okay, but I actually don't have all the answers when it comes to reading difficult books. And if you want more advice, you have to turn to the people who have been doing this for decades, often professionally. Skillshare, today's sponsor, is the best source for this wisdom. They are an online hub of learning with thousands of classes in every kind of creative and intellectual realm, like video editing, like productivity, and of course, analytical reading. For example, I recently did a class on critical reading by Charlie Strong. And it's always good to snap out of your bubble and see how more experienced people face the same challenges. Skillshare's teachers condense years of experience into bite-sized videos that guide you through the topic. So nothing feels intimidating any longer and you aren't digging around for cheap advice elsewhere on the internet. I also like how they encourage you to put your lessons into action by submitting a project. And we know that this practice is exactly what you need to learn faster. To try Skillshare for yourself, you can click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. And the first 500 people to do so will get a 1-month free trial. So I hope you have fun exploring, and thank you to Skillshare. Now the thing is with DNA is it's not just about concepts or ideas. It can also be stylistic. Let's say for example you picked up John Steinbeck's East of Eden, and for some reason it challenged you. Maybe it was too slow, maybe the themes weren't quite sticking out and you didn't really get it. Whatever, some issue was there. Now, instead of writing off the book or convincing yourself that you're this sub-60 IQ ape, maybe just try reading his other work. Something that's maybe more approachable, maybe more welcoming to a beginner, to a new reader of Steinbeck. Now, you don't do this to find philosophy. Maybe there's no crossover at all. But what you are doing is finding out Steinbeck's prose, his pacing. You're getting used to the essence of his writing. And maybe just like, when you meet someone new, you don't really get them at first, but over time, or maybe you meet them in a different context, you start to understand who they are and how they speak and how they think. And that's what we're doing here. Sometimes you just have to get used to how they write, and it's that simple. Now, that could all be well and good, but there's one question that lingers.
How do we know where to start? Where to begin?
And luckily for us, it's not difficult to answer, because thousands of people have struggled with this already, and they've figured it out, and so we're going to leech off their hard work, basically. If you just do some quick research, you will find guides and charts and articles and people in forums talking about their experience and giving you maybe the optimal order of reading. It might have some wiggle room, some variation, but overall they give you that structure that guides your learning in a efficient direction, a fruitful direction. You can also just ask Claude or some other AI. There's no shame in that, really. Oh, wow, AI slop. Okay, sorry, mate, you're better than us, we get it. But seriously, you can just ask Claude or something and it will spit out a pretty solid reading list for understanding that author, because at the end of the day, it's a search engine. It's going to read the same things you're reading and then collate them. Next up, we have a dilemma, because this is one of the most controversial areas of all literature, and it splits people into roughly two camps. More on that later though. I'm talking about commentaries, and really that extends to any secondary source that helps explain you through a book. One camp encourages them, and for good reason. They act like a teacher that walks you through the context and the themes and the plot itself. Many books, especially classics, we pluck out from hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And sometimes we are so far removed from that era and their problems and their way of thinking that we just don't really understand it as we look in from 2026. This can lead to the fallacy of presentism, which is where we interpret the past through a modern filter. We inject our contemporary values and morals and standards where they don't strictly belong. The classic example is people who will apply modern race and gender discourse to the Mughal Empire or something. And it's like, okay, sure, bro. Hope that PhD was worth it. Trust me. Now, even if you don't see a problem with that, it's still a barrier to understanding, because you may not be aligned with the author or the audience or just how they would have received the book at the time. And so commentaries clear that up. They step in to, give you a setting for the book to happen in. They say, well, what was going on at the time? What was the point of this book? What was the nature of it? Why was it written? And of course, they clear up specialist terms and vocabulary that you have no other way of knowing. They might also clear up ideas that may have been commonplace back then, but we NPCs of the present have no idea of. And that is necessary to prevent, like I said before, a catastrophic misreading. Now, before we hear the response from the other camp, where do you actually find these commentaries? Well, it really depends on what book you're talking about. Classics, for example, they've been studied forever, you're good there. You can go to any college website, they will have a list of recommended academic commentaries, and that's great because they're rigorous, they are well respected, and you can see the debate going on between these, learned people, these clever guys and girls, of course. And of course, it's the internet. You're going to find 1 billion people with their own 2 cents. Everything from schizophrenic YouTube comments or reviews, all the way to the more research, blogs, articles, videos, that sort of thing. As for everything else, all the other books, it really depends. It's going to be a mixed bag. If a book doesn't have a certain level of esteem, or it hasn't been around for a while, or it's just not as studied as the next one is, then you will struggle to find those academic, formal commentaries and takes. That's okay though. I don't have a stick up my arse. I don't think you do either. And it's still worth looking for essays or blogs or just the experience of other people who have read it, even laymen. Use your judgment, use your critical thinking, but don't neglect them completely. There is good stuff out there. Even people reviewing a book on Goodreads can offer a lot of insight into the themes. You'd be surprised. I've learned a lot from them. But the commentary haters have something to say about that. They argue that commentaries can become a crutch, and in the worst cases, they can manipulate you into a certain interpretation. In the first case, you might outsource your thinking to the commentary and just sort of take it for granted. And even worse, you might begin to see it as a replacement to the actual book itself and all of the hard work that entails. You're essentially cheating on it, which is just cruel, honestly. It's sad. Now, in the second case, you must remember that someone's commentary is their subjective interpretation of the book. Yes, they will try to be impartial. They will try and be as, objective and analytical as possible. But of course, we're human. We have our standards, our morals, our biases, our values, our goals, and all of that is going to taint, or at least color, how we see the book and what we draw from it. It's going to mean they omit things. It's going to mean they add things. It's going to mean they see it in a certain way, and that will steer how you think. Instead of forming your beliefs from a blank slate, you start to see them in a certain way because you're being influenced. You're seeing them through a certain lens, whether they're rose tinted or blue or orange or pink, it doesn't matter. It's changing how you see the book. So on one side, you have people saying, oh, commentaries, they're biased, they're cheating, they're influencing you. And on the other side, they're saying, well, don't be a twat. We need them sometimes. Guys, settle down. As the voice of reason, I'm here to say that there's a middle ground. You can have the best of both worlds because they both have good points. I like to read books by myself at first. Even if I know that I'll misinterpret things or I'll miss stuff or I'll just be completely confused. And I do this because I want my first reading to truly be my reading, my interpretation. Then afterwards, once I finish the book and I have my own take on it, I will look for commentaries. I'll look for videos. I'll see what people are saying. I'll join the discussion. And then based on my, independent framework, I will build on top of that. I will change how I see things. I will add new ideas. I will listen to people and I'll learn from them. Of course, other people are still going to influence you somehow, but that's normal. It's fine. You just have now an independent rock to build upon. I also really recommend to find books with the introductions in them, like the Penguin Classics. I know, they're boring, they're long, they're like 50 pages sometimes. You don't want to slog through that before you get to the damn first page of the actual book. But trust me, they're so good. They're not really commentaries. They don't teach you what to think or how to think or what all of the themes mean. No, they are more there to provide the essential context, the stuff you need. I read a bunch of tragedy last year. I would be completely lost without them. So give them a chance. They will explain a lot. I see it as the bare minimum to read the book properly, especially if you know nothing about it. Tip number 3 is to get the gist. When you visit a new city, what do? Do you step out the train station and then spend the entire day on that one road? No, well, unless you're a weirdo, but no, you don't. You walk. You take turns at random. You go into alleyways. You pop into a shop here and there. You go up the stairs. You just see what the vibes are. You get a feel for the city as a whole. Then maybe after a few days or when you next visit, you now have a gist of the city. You have an essence. You have an overview. And you can start zoning in on the details. Where are the good spots that the locals know? Where are the cool little areas that people don't really know about? Where are the best places to go? These are the details. And difficult books can follow that same pattern. If right off the bat you narrow yourself down and think, I have to understand every argument and every character and every theme, you're going to feel depressed within 10 pages because you just don't get anything and you don't have a feeling for the book. Instead, for the first read through, I lower my expectations and I just try and get to the end. And I try and get the feeling of the entire book. For example, with Herodotus, the histories, which I showed at the beginning, if I try to remember every single empire, every single race, every single bit of culture that was talked about, I kill myself before the middle. So you just need to be realistic and try and capture the unity of the book, the entirety of it, the blurb, you could say. And then when you come back to it in the future or in a week, in a month, in a year, now you have a scaffold. Now you have something to work with. You have a picture of what the book is and what the book is about. And then you can zone in on details. Then you can narrow down, you can focus on the finer arguments and truly start to understand it. Maybe the first read through is hard, I'll give you that. But the second and third don't have to be because you laid the groundwork. And that perfectly leads me into the final point, which is the most important, repetition. Because the fact is, and you can't avoid this, difficult books cannot be conquered in one go. It just doesn't make sense. It's against the very nature of them being difficult. Besides, many of these hard books are supposed to be reread anyway. because they grow with you. The more you mature as a person, the more insight and wisdom you gain, the more you see in them. And that can only be unlocked if you reread them a second, third, fourth time, and maybe until your grave. When I know a book is challenging me, or it has a lot to offer me, even if it's not particularly hard, I'm going to go over it 3 times in 3 distinct stages. In phase 1, I read and I take quick notes in the margin, just what I'm thinking at the time, nothing crazy. In phase 2, after I finish the book, I go back through the brief notes I made and then discuss them in more detail in Obsidian. Now, this will be a chance to flesh out the ideas, to really think about them and slow down and make them more official, I guess. In phase 3, I will archive some of the most important ideas as atomic notes. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, if you're saying, what the hell is an atomic note? Don't worry, I have a whole bunch of videos on that. I'll link them at the end. And you might think, well, brother, that is so long. And you're right, it is. It is long. And I'm not saying that to flex. I'm not saying it because you should copy me or like it's the gold standard or whatever. But I want time to understand my books and to learn something. I could read 250 books a year, like the self-help gurus, like the Guna girls on Book Talk, but I don't want to. I want to build wisdom and knowledge, and that takes time, and that's okay. The number of books is irrelevant to me, and what matters is that you are consistently learning and choosing your books wisely. Plus, it's the repetition and the rumination that helps you see patterns that you missed, and it helps you say, finally, I get it now. And that can't happen if you read it once, you crash out, you rage quit, and then you just never touch it again. So sometimes it needs that patience. Now, of course, don't go crazy. Don't take it to the extreme. Like, you still want to move along and read something else, but at the same time, see the value of slowness and repetition and rereading. Schedule it. Plan for that because it's so damn valuable, especially if you choose your books wisely. Those are my 4 tips. I'm slightly triggered because I forgot to hit record and it erased like an hour of shouting into the camera, but whatever, it's fine. Also, a small announcement / apology. If you are on the mailing list, the newsletter, I'm sorry, because it still exists, don't worry, it's happening. But I'm moving platforms, I'm updating lots of technical stuff. It's a pain in the ass. I'm learning stuff on the go. So hopefully they'll be back in a week or 2, but they still exist. You are still signed up. And if you're not, there will be links in future videos to sign up. So, sorry. And as always, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me how you face hard books because I learned something, everyone else learned something. It's great. I'll link some videos on the screen and thank you so much for watching.